Benchwarmers, we are hoping that you're enjoying your Friday, and I got something that should make it a little bit better. Better bonus episode, another bonus Friday from the Far End of the Bench podcast, and the guest that I have today should also make it even that much better. Ladies and gentlemen, joining today on the Far End of the Bench podcast, now two-time NCAA D2 National Wrestling Tournament qualifier and 2022 NCAA All-American at 165 pounds, Western Colorado University Mountaineer, Hunter Mullin. Thank you very much for jumping on the podcast and taking some time away from training, because I know that's all you wrestlers do. Like, you guys got one speed, it's training or eating, and you're not eating right now. So thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks, Jimmy. It's awesome. I was pumped when he asked me, and yeah, always fun to sit down and talk about wrestling. So, but I was eating right before I got on, so it never stops.
Yeah, so. For people who don't know wrestling, yeah, it's Hunter and I both are aware, but like, if you're not eating, you might as well be working out so you can eat more later. Like, yeah, there is really only two speeds. But Hunter, I wanted to have you on. We're obviously it's an excuse to see you and talk to you, because I haven't actually been able to speak to you since before the pandemic, like in person. So getting you back on that way. And yeah, we started working in res life. Your freshman year was my second year, so we're fairly close in age. But yeah, it's been wild how long it's been since we actually were able to get in contact or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all strung together. Every year's just become one big long year since I got here. So
yeah, and you started college like a year later than me, but you're only going into your senior year. Like, the COVID year totally screwed everything up. But just real quickly, I'm going to ask you some questions so that our listeners can get to know you a little bit better, because obviously I know you fairly well. But for those people who are listening now, or maybe your family members or something like that, people checking out the podcast, Go Mountaineers has your hometown listed as Clay Center, Kansas. Is that correct?
Yep, that's correct. Clay Center, Kansas. I'm actually from a little town southeast of there, or southwest of there, called Longford. Super small town, like probably 50 people. But we live right outside of that. But yeah, I went to school in Clay Center, grew up in Clay Center. All my family's from there. So yeah, just living out in the boonies there in Kansas.
So the transition to Gunnison, from one, you basically traded one small town for another, except Gunnison might have seemed a little bit bigger with the college and everything like that.
Yeah, for sure. It's Clay Center is about the same size in terms of population as Gunnison, and yeah.
So right. Besides wrestling, what do you guys do for fun normally? I know you're a big outdoors guy, so is it mainly hunting and fishing when you're not in season, or what else is there to do out? What'd you spend your time doing growing up? What were your hobbies?
Yeah, I was outside all the time. Did a lot of hunting, a lot of fishing. Mostly, I guess what I do now, I mostly coyote hunt when I'm home. Me and my brother and my dad are huge coyote hunters and bird hunters, and really just whatever you can look down a barrel at, we do. And so that's super fun. Always played sports growing up, pretty much tried everything. It was fun because I was kind of I feel like me and you, we were kind of the last generation before everyone was plugged in. And so we were just always outside finding something to do or getting in trouble or something.
Right. Yeah. And even like, I don't have the small town experience from growing up, so I can assume that whole pretty much latchkey you're basically an extra version of the latchkey generation, since all you basically had to find your own entertainment. Were you pushed a certain way, or were you always more of like a wrestling fan? I know you played football in high school, but growing up, like, did you love wrestling the way that you love it now? I'll tell you, just from personal experience, I hated wrestling up until sixth grade. Like, I quit going into sixth grade and took all of that year off, and then came back and found the love for it again. But I absolutely hated it. So what was your early experience with wrestling, and did you love it as much as you do now?
So no, I did not. So I'm from Clay Center was a total wrestling powerhouse in the 2000s. We won 5 state titles from 2002 to 2011. We were ranked in the country for a little bit. And so you just grow up seeing these guys, and you're like, man, I want to try this. I want to wrestle. And a couple of my really good buddies that live down the road from us, they wrestled. And so one day I was like a first grader. I was like, yeah, I'll go to wrestling practice. And it was just kind of what everyone tried. And I was not good. I mean, I was a pretty soft, pretty passive little kid. I was super hyper and like super active, but just didn't understand like physical sports that much, like those contact sports. Like I didn't really want to do it that much. But I stuck it out for a couple years. And then I remember one time I had like just a really bad tournament. And I told my dad, I'm like, hey, I'm done. Like, I'm not going to practice next week. And so probably like halfway through third grade, I quit and played basketball for a few years and got really big into football, and then went out again in seventh grade just because I knew it would help me with football. And I tried it again, and the bug kind of bit me then in seventh grade, and I was hooked on it.
Yeah, it's interesting, like the similarity, because as you're talking, like early on, I never necessarily had. Are you the oldest? I know you said you had a brother. Are you the oldest?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I got a younger brother and a younger sister.
yeah, I feel like it's different because I wrestle. You wrestle with your siblings, but then when you get into that area and Clay Center being a powerhouse, I didn't know it at the time, but wrestling for Pomona High School's youth group, which turned into one of the better youth programs in the state of Colorado. I was just like, when you're not, I wasn't indoctrinated into it, and I didn't have anybody that I could look up to. And then when you're going out there, it's a hard sport to just get your ass kicked in every single
Yeah,
day.
exactly.
So,
And you don't want to lose. You don't understand when you're that young. You don't understand why you're losing.
mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, I'm just not good at this. And so it takes definitely a perspective shift when you're
Yeah,
younger.
and because the coaches are watching the entire time, and you have people telling you exactly what you did to lose. It's that ability. That's why I love wrestling and think that it's one of the best sports to play, especially as you develop, because you got to let your ego go and not think that you understand everything as to what went on, and you just got caught in the fluke. There's a step and a process, and you, as much as we all hate to lose, you can learn so much, especially from losing in a wrestling match.
Yeah. And I think that was the difference once I got into junior high, was because like I mean, I wasn't like I don't think I was like a natural or anything, but I just loved working. I loved doing it. And so, and I think that's where I fell in love with it, was like the curiosity of, all right, what's one thing I can do to close the gap on this guy, or one thing I can do to maybe score 2 or 3 more points in this match. And then it just kind of started building on itself. And, eventually you're beating those guys that you never thought you would even be close to.
So as you're going through, you're playing football, you come back to wrestling. Did you already know you wanted to play a sport in college, or were you kind of just playing sports to pass the time? Was college even something that you wanted to do?
Yeah. So I wanted to play in the NFL, like every kid wants to play in the NFL. And so, and my dad played college football, and my mom ran track in college, and it was never like this thing, like, oh, you have to do it. But I think we had a very, just like that natural competition in our house. And that was kind of like, I never got pressured into doing sports, but it was like, man, I love doing this stuff. Like I just always loved competing, and I liked beating people, and it was fun. And so I think I was, up until I was probably a sophomore in high school, I was pretty set on playing football in college. And then, just wrestling kind of took over my life, and I decided that was what I really wanted to buckle down and be good at.
Do you kind of remember that initial thought in your head where you're like, maybe college football is not for me, but I can try out this college wrestling thing? And then when you did make that switch, did you have people telling you, because I shocker, the wrestling team worked harder than the football team. Like both teams worked very hard, but college wrestling practices, I can't even imagine, because the high school wrestling practices that I went through were 10 times more difficult than any football practice I could have had in college. So
Yeah.
did you
And
have that conversation or anything?
no, and I guess it was probably, it wasn't really changing my mind on what I wanted to do in college. It was just, I qualified for state my freshman year, and I didn't place. And I was, up until that moment, I was like just happy to be there. And then I didn't place, and I was just like way more upset than I thought I would be. And so I was sitting there watching the state finals my freshman year, and I just like couldn't stand not being that guy. Like I couldn't stand not being as good as I could at this. And so it wasn't really that I made the decision to do it in college over football. It was that I don't know if I would be able to, like, just the accountability of it was insane to me, and the standard that I wanted to hold myself to. And I felt like wrestling was a sport that I could do that the best in. And football, it's hard because, like, I was a decent high school football player, but not great. I wasn't getting a ton of looks for football. I wasn't very big. I wasn't very fast. And so it's hard to get looks. And I just always remember being frustrated that when I was out of a play, or like when a play wasn't coming my way or something like that. And so I think maybe there was definitely a little bit of like selfishness. Like I want to be the guy that people are watching, and I want to be the guy that's on that stage. And so I think that was maybe a big part of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it is strange too, because wrestling, a lot like these other individualized team sports, you can go out there and you could dominate your guy that you wrestled, but your team, that could be the only match that you guys win all night. You can't celebrate.
Yeah.
You feel good, but you can't feel great. So it is definitely a different mindset from these other more, I guess, quote unquote, traditional sports. And was that something you were kind of aware of at the time, or is it something where you look back and go, that's more of the reason why I made this decision to go down this path?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely came later. Um, when you're in that moment, when you're 13 or 14 years old, you don't think about why you're doing what you're doing. But looking back on it, I would I wanted that pressure on me, and I hated the idea of I could do my job right and I could still be on the losing end. Even at least in wrestling, you can do what you're supposed to do and you can still come out with a W. And like I said, not that I was that good at any other sports, but just like I like, if we were going to lose, I wanted it to be my fault, I guess. And if we were going to win, if we were going to get a win, I wanted it to be because I won. Um, so that was, I think, looking back on it, that was probably it when I was younger.
Yeah, that shows a level of leadership that a lot of people, I'm sure, were excited when they ended up discovering that in you. So you talked a little bit about the football recruiting. How was your experience getting recruited for wrestling? I guess maybe give us a general overview of what your experience of wrestling recruiting was like, because we've had football players on, but never anybody who did something else in college. So what was that like?
It's probably pretty similar. I think when I won state my junior year, and I was kind of expecting people to reach out to me a little bit. And some schools had, like Fort Hays was recruiting me pretty hard, and some other, a couple in, I don't know if any NAIs were, maybe, I'm not sure, but a couple schools had reached out, but I wasn't getting like that, like big recruit attention level, which makes sense. Like outside of Kansas 4A, I hadn't really done much at that up until that point. Like I hadn't placed in any national tournaments or beaten any top ranked guys or anything like that. So I guess at the beginning it was kind of frustrating. And then my junior year, so it's kind of a funny story. So the summer between my junior and senior year, we have family out in Montrose, and we went and we were driving out here and we stopped and visited Pueblo. And that trip, it was kind of just like an unofficial visit, like nothing super impressive, like, not great. And so
We're Western podcast. You don't have to hold back.
Yeah, no, yeah. So it was whatever. Knew I probably wasn't gonna go there. And then one of my dad's buddies called him and he was like, "Hey, I know you guys are going out there. Like, you should stop in Gunnison and check out Western." And we're like, "All right." And so we're like, might as well, we're here. And so called up Miles Van He, and and it was just like a totally different experience than what I had. Like, he had just met me and he was treating me like the biggest recruit they had. Took us out to lunch, let us go see the wrestling room, like all these things just on an unofficial visit. And I was like just made me feel like they wanted me here. And it was the first school that I was like, man, I can see myself going here. And so after that, everyone else that recruited me kind of compared me to I kind of compared to Western. And I took a couple visits, like I took a visit to Hayes and to Baker in Kansas, but then I signed with Western in November of my senior year. And so.
You're
that was
you're
kind of,
early for wrestling standards because
yeah.
that's before the season and everything. It's funny too because you mentioned I actually one of my questions was referencing Coach Van Hee, and it
Mm,
was more you were technically you were like the first or second recruiting class that Pfeiffer had, where he was the head coach that
yeah.
Van Hee wouldn't have had anything to do with after he made that transition to athletic director.
Mm,
But that whole like wrestling, unless you're an alumni of Western or like been around the campus to understand the culture of that wrestling team, that's one of the most solid foundations that I think I've ever been around. And I wasn't even directly involved. I just called wrestling matches on the radio
yeah.
station, and you could still tell like Pfeiffer and Van He have made that place just an incredible culture, and you guys all love each other on the team. It just seems like a really special environment.
No, for sure. And, can't say enough about Coach Pfeiffer. Absolutely. The things that guy has done for me, and
He's
the
been a
way
guest
he's
too, so
told me.
he's listened and McMahill's listened, so they're probably expecting their shout outs too. Just throwing that
Oh,
out there.
they're getting their shout outs. Don't worry. Yeah. Can't say enough about those guys at all. They're the best.
Well, then when we do get to Western and everything like that, you come in and redshirt. Was that a process like? Well, actually, before we get to that, you go from Kansas, which is notoriously flat, to the middle of the Rocky Mountains. Was there a little bit of an adjustment there, like you can't see the rest of the state when you stand at your front door?
Yeah. Yeah. Kansas, you can watch your dog run away for a week out there, man. It's different for sure. But yeah, it was like, and we had always like come up here for spring break and for summers, like up along I-70 there, and we skied and snowboarded a lot out there. So I'd been out here. And I always loved it. I always loved Colorado. It was when I got a chance to go to school out here, I was like gung ho set on it. But it was an adjustment. I remember like driving home from Christmas break or driving home for Thanksgiving my freshman year, and it was like, holy dude, I can breathe again. Like I don't feel like claustrophobic anymore. But yeah,
Yeah,
it was
you got to
an,
go work out at home and just run for days. That's the best part about it.
oh, it's great. It's a different feeling.
So then you get there, you redshirt your initially. Was that something that the coaches, when you talked to Pfeiffer and those guys when you got there, was that something that was kind of decided, or were you competing for a starting job the day you stepped on campus?
No, I wasn't. So, and honestly, I wanted a red shirt. I was down for it. I think and there's your guys like that are can come in and are ready to go. I still had a lot of growing to do. As a freshman, I could, I could compete. But I wasn't like on that level. Like we had good guys in that room. We had Ryan Pello and Sean Byrigger and Travis Bradford and guys like that like they put their whoopings on me. And then obviously you move up and you got Super Nah. So I was more excited to just eat it up from those guys. I was just ready to learn as much as I could coming in. So I was fine with redshirting. I wrestled a lot of matches my redshirt year. I think I wrestled 25 or 26 matches, just at open tournaments, and it was definitely a year that I needed for
That
sure.
that's the best part about I think redshirting when you wrestle is that you can still go and actually get live competition at these open tournaments. You just don't you're competing unattached is how they call it. So that's great. And then with those guys that you were talking about in front of you, especially like guys like Supernaut who've been there and dominated the RMAC conference for the entire time that they were in college, pretty much. And as a high school wrestler in Colorado myself, just the legend of Brandon Supernaut from Colorado Springs was something else. Were guys like that open to taking you under their wing and teaching you? Is that kind of how things work in the room?
Yeah. So I was on Supernaut's hip pretty much those first 2 years. Yeah, I was probably annoyed him sometimes, but every chance I got, I was asking him questions or picking his brain on stuff, and he was great. I mean, he took me under his wing and showed me the ropes, and he was, and he always said, he's like, someday you're going to be in this situation. Like, this is what you need to be ready for. This is how it's going to be. And he was super gracious and super willing to just let me pick his brain as a freshman. And all those guys were, at that time. And we had a really good, solid core group of leadership then that, they were willing to help me out with whatever I needed.
That's great to hear, and it's cool to think about. Like, I was in a situation where I was seeing those guys a lot and calling their matches, and then you think about it, and the reason why we're able to talk about wrestling is such a great program, especially at Western, is the fact that you guys do help each other out. There isn't I'm the number one, so I'm gonna be the leader, and nobody else is gonna be able to touch me. That's the best part about wrestle offs too, is that you're never safe necessarily in wrestling. Like any given week, if you slip up and the guy below you beats you, it's their turn to shine, and you kind of got to be okay with that and ready to go back to the grindstone. During that season, was there conversation at all about maybe pulling your red shirt and having you earn some points for the team at a tournament? Was that ever a need that season?
No, there was never really any talk of it. I traveled with the varsity that year, but that was kind of more just to get experience with traveling and being around the team on road trips and being an extra workout partner. But as far as I can remember, Ryan Pello was tearing it up that year, and he was pinning fools, and he was beating guys. And so there was never really any discussion of it during that redshirt year.
I remember that season. That was the winter of the cow catcher in Gunnison, because that dude would be getting his ass kicked for like 6.5 minutes of the match, and then all of a sudden he'd be pinning him and earning 6 points. You're like, what?
Man, so good on top. That dude, we had a practice one day where we just went live for an hour, and I bet I was on bottom for 55 minutes against him. He was a hammer.
Those are the days where you get out and you're just like, you feel like you weigh 130 or 300 pounds because you had another 150-pound man on your back for the entirety of 2 hours. So then at the end of that first season, you applied to be an RA. You started to work in Res Life. It's fairly common at Western for the wrestling team to be involved in that. Is that something that the coaches kind of push on you, or was that a decision you kind of made on your own?
No, that was kind of me and my parents. It's a great scholarship and a good job to have on campus, and it opens up a lot of doors for you. And so kind of probably halfway through my freshman year, me and my parents started working on that. And I had talked to guys that had been RAs like Slaughter and Super Non, guys like that kind of helped me out with it and guided me along. And it was a lot to figure out, but once I got in it, it wasn't too hard to catch on to.
Yeah, that's kind of where, obviously that's where you and I met. That's where I got close with Stearman, because he and I were working in the same complex, and even just the wrestlers throughout the rest of the staff too. I'm blanking on the other guys that were wrestlers that were also RAs at that time, but it was cool. It was a cool way to meet up, especially as fellow athletes. That was the one thing I was looking for when I showed up to orientation. It's like, all right. And then I saw the cauliflower ear on you guys. I was like, that's my section. That's where I'm going to be.
Absolutely.
Those are the guys that I'm going to vibe with the most.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So after that season, you redshirted, and then you're competing in the Crimson and Slate duel for the number one spot at 165 pounds, which I was thinking that you had a chance, but I wasn't sure the competition and everything, how that was going to go. Did you have a good feeling during that summer and kind of the preseason as to what you were going to be going for in that sophomore year?
Yeah. Are you talking about the redshirt freshman year or the redshirt?
Yeah, redshirt freshman year. Sorry,
redshirt freshman year.
Or whichever year was your first. Like I said, I can't remember your first year starting.
Yeah, my redshirt freshman year is my first year starting, and I knew I'd have a shot. And honestly, like, I expected it for myself. I have lived up here every summer. I lift every day all through the summer. I wrestle almost every day all through the summer. I put in. I felt like I had the shot, and and it was bigger than making varsity at that point already for me. It's always harder than you think it's going to be, and I took my lumps that first year in the lineup, but I think I knew I'd have the opportunity, and so just when the opportunity came, I wanted to be ready to go.
What would you say would be like the biggest transition that you had to learn? Because that's always what you're told, is when you move up in level of competition, like going from high school to college, it's going to be faster. And when you go from just being on the college team to starting, it's going to be even more. What were the kind of steps, the hurdles that you had to clear at each step?
Scoring, like just being able to chain attacks together and chain shots together. In high school, you can kind of get by with some stuff. Like I had a good snap down go behind, and I could get to a single leg in high school. I got to college, and Coach Pfeiffer had me shooting 500 high crotches over Christmas break, like things like that, like being able to just recognize your opportunities, and staying a step ahead. I think had a habit early on of being super reactive, and it's still something I have to work on today, is kind of waiting for the guy I'm wrestling to make a mistake. But just being able to recognize your chances to score is huge. And then being able to wrestle when you're tired was a huge part of what I figured out. I had to do was learn to wrestle when you're tired and take advantage of every chance you get to score.
Yeah, that the counter style was something that Rev and I, when we were talking about it on the radio, noticed that early on. Like, the offense was always there. You could always get to a shot if you needed to, but you could tell you were way more comfortable trying to go off of what the other guy did instead of maybe dictating the match. And that's a lesson I can remember from my wrestling days, was always like, wrestle to win, don't wrestle not to lose. And I feel like that's something that a lot of athletes, especially when they get to college, have to learn, is like, there's a difference between just doing something to be okay and doing something to actually take advantage of the situation. So it sounds like during that first season and then going into the year where you end up qualifying for your first national tournament, that was kind of the steps that you took to get yourself into that position.
Yeah, and it was a lot for sure. And yeah, getting out of that win at all costs mindset. I mean, it took 3 years. It took, because I was so just brought up, like, do what you got to do to win. And like, I remember like the state tournament my senior year, I locked up, and I still won it, but I won every match by like 2 points, and it was boring and I hated it. And that mindset, like, it's not something you just flip. It took me years to learn how to just perform.
Once you finally did that, you probably perform, like, you feel like you wrestle a lot better now. You might not even be that much better of a wrestler, but it just feels a little bit more natural once you get that final mental hurdle out of you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then that season that you do qualify, obviously we're going to get to the ending of that, and I want to kind of save that. But going into that initial season, so you qualify for the 2020 NCAA D2 tournament. At what point did you kind of have it in your mindset? Was it maybe you're dominating the RMAC dual season? I know that was the year where you guys split the conference championship with Mines. Or was it maybe a tournament that you went in that you were not expected to make any noise in? You kind of ended up turning things around. So what was that point during the season where you were like, I'm going to be a national qualifier?
So that was a crazy year. So like at the start of that year, we were planning on, I was going to cut to 57, and I made it for the Cowboy Open barely.
How did you do that, by the way? If you've ever seen Hunter, 157 would probably be like not a good situation for you.
It was bad. I was tiny, and I went 1 and 2. I didn't wrestle good, and a lot of it was. And then the next week I missed weight for the Shattern duel, and that was kind of a point where like there was some adversity there, and I didn't really handle it too well. Because a lot of it was me. Like a lot of it, I was trying to cut a lot of weight at once. I wasn't really descending well. So a lot of it was just these discipline hurdles that I had to get over, that I didn't really handle too well. So then the week I tried to make 57, go back up to 65 for a couple weeks. And then Ruger got hurt. And so Coach Pfeiffer comes up to me after practice one day, and he's like, hey, we want to slide you in at 84 for the Mesa duel. And I go in, wrestle 84 for the Mesa duel, because I would get big. I walk around in the summers at 80, and I'm used to wrestling big guys. And so go to the Mesa duel, win a crazy match, then go to the Midwest Classic and went 0 and 2. And so that was like, dude, what the heck? Like, this is just not panning out. So then I start, and so the way cutting weight works is you can only lose like 1.5% of your body weight per week. And so I was on a descent plan back down to 65 for like most of the season, or like the whole second semester. So there was a point in the year where I was like, man, I'm not even going to get a spot. Like,
Yeah, you're
what am I
running out
doing?
of time to qualify at
Yeah.
that point.
And so we go to New Mexico Highlands, and it's my like second competition that I can make 65 for. And I miss weight for that. And I've never like missed weight in my life. And it was just like kind of the same thing, like just the discipline aspect of it and the paying attention to details and like stuff like that. So at that point I missed weight and I'm like, dude, my season's done. And, and I ended up getting like, it was rock bottom pretty much as an athlete. And so I ended up getting a shot at 65s, getting a spot. So I didn't get the spot at 65 until probably 2 weeks before before regionals. And then I go and I lose the home duel against Mines to Skylar Likens. And the next week I lose to Fred Green at home again. And so I'm like, man, what is going on? But then, like you get to the regional tournament and I got fifth as a freshman there. And I was kind of you kind of get to the point where you're just sick of being the guy that doesn't get the job done. Mm-hmm. And so that regional tournament, it was like, look, you already have never qualified. Like, you might as well just let it all hang. Like, you got nothing to lose. Like, you've had a rough season. Like, just go wrestle as hard as you can. And so honestly, after really at the regional tournament, I was like, you know what, I'm going to freaking get the job done. And so that was probably the first point in the season where I really had like some belief in myself and what I could do. And it ended up working out.
Yeah, and that's going to make my next question even more interesting to get your answer. Coach Pfeiffer comes down to you guys wherever he made the announcement. It's March 2020. You guys are at the regional tournament, like on site. You just finished one of your pre-tournament roles, and Coach Pfeiffer comes and tells you guys, "Hey, tournament's been taken away from you." What was can you put that moment into words? Are there even words to describe what you were feeling at that point?
No, man, it was brutal. I've never seen more grown men cry in my life. Like, it was heartbreaking for sure. And in the moment, you don't know how to react. Like, in the moment, the first thing I think is like, all right, I got to call my dad. Like, they're on their way up here. And at first you're just mad and you just hate everything. And it was so stupid. And you're just bitter. And then you get back to Gunnison and you're just sad. You're like, you really truly realize like the opportunity that you just got taken from you. And like, I was bitter about it for a long time, like a long time. And it was just more sad than anything. Like, it was just frustrating.
Is that bitterness? Because I saw your post, and that's kind of why I reached out to you after the national tournament. Is that bitterness kind of what led to maybe your spiral downward a little bit during the pandemic? It wasn't anything major, but like, yeah, it's tough. Like, I don't even know how I would react in that situation. And you learn that you get all of that eligibility back, so it doesn't even really affect your time in college, but where you may be wondering if you're going to get another chance to qualify, and that maybe caused a little bit of your it's called I can't think of any other word besides rumspringen now, like what the Mennonites do for the year, yeah, if they want to decide if they want to stay in the culture. What do you think that maybe was contributed to it a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think I knew I wasn't done wrestling. Like, I knew that. Like, there was no part of me that was worried about continuing to wrestle. I think it was more like once that happened, I just let my emotions take control of me for a while. And so that summer I kind of like, we can't wrestle, we can't work out together. Like, I kind of just let myself go and let my discipline go outside of wrestling. So like the work never changed. Is like the way I like to think about it. Like, I was still like finding ways to lift. I was still like, I was driving 45 minutes to an hour just to find a wrestling mat anywhere I could to get on. So the work didn't change, but all the stuff outside of it had gone. Like, I wasn't sleeping, I was partying, like just like kind of letting it get a little out of control. And And it was probably like halfway through the summer that, or no, not even halfway, probably toward the end of the summer that I was like, dude, you got to dial in. Like, you're not the only one suffering from this. Like just kind of get over yourself a little bit. And so it was tough, but it helped me. It had to happen.
Did you have like a mentor? Any of the coaches maybe notice what was going on and try and pull you back to where you were? Was it truly just maybe your own kind of, like we said, getting rid of the ego that you're completely right? Was it more of an internal drive, or did you have a mentor to maybe reach out and try and pull you back?
I think it was maybe a little more internal. Like the coaches are always there. Like they'll always talk to you. I think there was a lot of stuff that I tried to hide, like a lot of it was emotional, like got super depressed, got super just mad at everything. And a lot of that stuff I would try and cover up. So, really a lot of it was like, look, man, you can still be a 2-time national champ. And like, you're that guy, and you're the guy that people on the team are looking to. So you gotta be that. And it might not be what you want to do right now, but it's what you got to do. So a lot of it was just like a lot of things like that you got to figure out on your own.
It sounds like, there was a lot that had to go in it. And then after you get through all of that, you come back and we talked about you being on Super Nas hip. Did you kind of feel when you made that transition back and you were able to get back in the room, did you maybe feel like you were the guy that people were trying to follow around and learn things from? Did you actually feel that when you got back to the room?
Yeah, I think so. Especially after the gap year, it was, and we have a great group of guys on the team that are like that. We have that core group of, me, Hannenberg, Fats, Patty, Jimmy, Ruger, Sammy, and like you can name 15 guys that are like that. But I knew it was kind of like, all right, like you got to take on this leadership role. And especially after being away from the team for a whole year and having to hold myself accountable through a whole winter and keep on training. And because even during the gap year, I was still training every day, and I was coaching, and I was staying in shape and wrestling whenever I could. But I think just the fire got lit to compete, but it also got lit to be around like-minded people.
Yeah. Was there anybody that maybe was mad at you that you took the gap year? Obviously, missing out on having somebody like you in the lineup isn't going to bode well for the team. Were there people that were maybe mad at you for taking that time away? Maybe didn't understand the full nature of your situation?
No, I don't think so. I mean, not that I talked to. I mean, pretty much the people who I talked to about it, it was, me and Piper talked about it, and then me and my dad talked about it. And yeah, me and my mom and dad both sat down and discussed it, and it was a 2-day conversation. It was, hey, I think this would be good for me. Take a year, make some money, coach, and just kind of figure some stuff out in a year that we weren't sure what was going to happen anyway. Because at that point, when I decided to take the year off, I didn't know about us getting the year of eligibility back. And so I thought, this is what might be best for me. And so did Coach Piper, and so did my parents. And so after that, I didn't really talk to a whole lot of people about it. I'd made my decision.
Probably a good way to go about it, because then you don't ever have to second guess what you did decide, and don't have to go back on it. Can you maybe put into words that feeling of getting Mad Jack back across your chest and pulling off a win for the first time back after the gap year, after the national tournament being canceled? Is there a better feeling that you've experienced in a wrestling situation?
It's up there. I mean, like going out against San Francisco and putting up 20 points in a match, the first duel of the year, that was an awesome feeling. And it all goes by so fast that you don't even feel like you skipped a whole year. It wasn't like I was coming back into this new foreign thing that I was new to, but just the feeling of, all right, like we're right back in it. Like, let's keep working. Let's go right back to work.
there isn't much better way to start your season, especially after you haven't competed in a long time, than a tech fall over an opponent that, you guys handled them fairly easily, but like that had to set a decent tone throughout the rest of the year. So we talked about your first trip to nationals, and it was basically like a last second switch that got flipped in regionals. So for this past year, obviously starting things off with a tech fall and then moving forward, did it go smoothly, or were there bumps in this road to the national tournament as well?
I mean, there were bumps, but I think I had learned so much just through everything, through the 2 years before, that, you like kind of going back to it, like, all right, I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. And then I'm going to do a few things that I'm not supposed to do, but they're going to be good things. And just being able to compartmentalize everything, maybe I had a rough weight cut 2 years ago, it would have been downhill. But now it's like, all right, it's just part of it. Like that part's over. So there were bumps in the road. Like I made the finals at the Kearney Open and got tech fall by Matt Malcolm, who ended up winning a national title this year. And that was tough. And then Midwest Classic, I come out and go 0-2 or go 2-2, lost in the quarterfinals, and then lost first round of backside. And so there were little bumps like that, but like going back to the coaches, like, they were just always just kept believing in me. And like, I remember after Midwest Classic, we're on the plane ride, and Midwest, it was kind of one of those tournaments where I like locked up and wrestled tight. And I hadn't really wrestled tight all year, but I did then. And, Coach Pfeiffer says, hey, like, as soon as your fear of wrestling not to your potential is bigger than your fear of losing, you're going to take off. And I took that to heart, and I, wrote it up and put it on my wall, like my fear of not competing well is bigger than my fear of losing. And just things like that they just ingrain into you the whole time you're here. You got to let it click for yourself. And so I think Midwest Classic was a huge turning point in my season, for sure.
So let's go into now the few days leading up to the tournament. And there had to be a lot of emotion because it had basically been 2 years to the day where you got your first chance taken away. What were your feelings going into maybe that first competition of the national tournament, those nights leading up in the hotel? Did you have a lot of nervous energy? Did you maybe feel calm? What was the vibe going into the tournament?
I was super calm. I get way more nervous for regionals than nationals. Or at least this year I did, because I was supposed to be at the national tournament, just based on how it worked out and, the way the season played out, I was supposed to be there. So really leading up to the tournament, and we had the group of guys we had going, I mean, it doesn't get much more relaxed than going with Fats and Hannenberg to a tournament. And so it was fun. And, we knew that the work had been done, and that we all deserved to be there, and that we had earned it and belonged there. And so really leading up to nationals, it was kind of just business as usual. Nothing really crazy or special. I was pretty calm and cool going in.
And then you go through, you end up All-American, getting All-American status and the 7th place finish for your first true time at the national tournament. What did you learn, and what are you going to take to next season now that you've actually competed there? You've qualified for it. You've now competed in it. You've become an All-American and placed at the tournament. Obviously, we know what the next goal in your mind is, but what did you take from that experience that's going to help you in the off season and leading into the 2023 year?
Just anyone can get the job done. You got to be, anyone can be the best wrestler in that tournament on one day. They say that everyone's 0-0 going to nationals, and it's so true. And knowing that it can happen to you, like you can be the guy that gets upset, but you can also be the guy that goes on a tear and runs through the tournament. And so I think just that belief and knowing that, like, I'm on the right track and the team's on the right track, and just keep you know, anything that one of my coaches says, man, that's gold, because that's what got me here. And so I think it's just confidence, like I'm gunning for it. I'm right there.
You seem focused, and we talked a little bit before we started recording. You took spring break off, and you were already trying to bite through your seatbelt to get back in the wrestling room in Gunnison when you're on your way back. So it seems like you have things in the right place, and I know that I have faith. I know that the listeners who've listened to Coach Pfeiffer on, that was like the main thing, the main feedback we got when we had Coach Pfeiffer on. We came down and we're at the High Alpine Brewing Company with him, and people were just like, that guy can get you to do anything. Like, he is the perfect motivator. I could go storm Normandy if Coach Pfeiffer gave me a pregame speech before that.
Yeah, and him and Dono and Summers and Glenn, man, there's no better group of guys I'd rather be around. And yeah, and there's nothing like going out and being like, hey man, it works. Like it just works. The stuff that they tell you, if you buy into it, nothing beats belief, and nothing beats belief in them. So it's
almost
awesome.
Like they know what they're talking about, huh?
Yeah, no kidding.
All right. I've taken up enough of your second snack time post practice. So rapid fire questions. We do this with all of our guests. We'll let you finish up with these. What's your favorite trip that you've gone on in your college wrestling career?
Favorite wrestling trip? So we went down to South Carolina 2 years ago and wrestled some duels at Newberry. And I didn't wrestle good. I went 1-3, but it was just a super fun trip to be with the team the whole time and get to travel that far. It was really fun. And then really just any long road trip is fun. Just hanging out on the bus and the hotel with the guys. Like those are some good memories.
Favorite place that you've lived on campus or in Gunnison? I'll give you both, since I know that you're not on campus anymore.
Dude, right here, my trailer house. I freaking love it. Got it. That's one thing that came out of gap year is found a house and was able to get it, and I love it here. So
your go-to restaurant in town? What's the best restaurant in Gunnison? I asked Will this when he was on too, so I'm not just singling you out.
Okay, 5B's barbecue.
He went Old Miner, but that was only because he worked there. So yeah. 5B's got the best wings in town.
What?
Does 5B's have the best wings in town for Wing Wednesday?
Yeah, I think so. All right. I think so. I love 5B's.
Who's your travel partner? Who'd you sit next to on the bus or the plane? Who'd you room with? Who was your guy?
So me and Sammy have always roomed together since we were freshmen. Mm-hmm. We always make sure we get in the hotel room together. Travel buddy, kind of just hang out with everybody. On the trip, you kind of find your way to different guys. But in terms of hotel roommates, it's always been Sammy D.
And then the last one that I have, if you have a single meal that you can cheat with and you're still going to make weight after you eat it. So this is like you're in the thick of trying to get down, but you can eat whatever you want and you're not going to gain any weight from it. What's your go-to meal?
Probably chicken fried steak and potatoes, dude.
Nice.
Probably just steak and potatoes, not chicken fried, just steak. Just steak and potatoes. I eat it almost every night anyway. And I just can't get enough of it.
You wrestlers are also simple. Just meat and potatoes, and that's about it. I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do the meat potatoes, and I'm going to come back, and that's all.
Yep, that's all you need.
Now, Hunter, I can't thank you enough. This has been awesome getting you on and talking to you a little bit more about your time at Western. Obviously, I'm rooting for you. The people that have listened to Coach Pfeiffer, I know that if he's listening, Coach McMahill, big shout out to you guys. I'm hoping to get down, at least see you guys wrestle. Maybe if you come up to Golden at some point, I'll try and get out there. But it's been great having you on and talking with you, and I can't wait to see how you come back for your final season of college. I don't know if you've thought about that yet, but you're coming up on your last ride, so I'm looking forward to seeing what you're doing.
Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on. It's always fun. Always good to see you. So thank you for letting me take up some time.
No problem. Go Mountaineers. And we'll see everybody back here on Wednesday for our regularly scheduled podcast, but be sure to check Hunter out. Follow along if you're a fan of RMAC Wrestling, Western Colorado 165 pounder, or are you moving weights? Are you sticking to 165s?
I'm a career 65.
There you go. 165 Western Colorado at Muldozer7 on social media. Is that right?
Yep.
There you go. Follow Hunter, keep up with him, and be sure to check us out coming back on Wednesday for our next episode.